Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. Happy Monday to all of our listeners. The Seahawks finally back in action this week. They got to enjoy a bye in Week 9, now prepping to play the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field on Sunday. And turns out number 3 is going to be back under center. We'll be breaking down his return as well as a couple other players coming off of injured reserve and taking a look at the latest on Odell Beckham Jr., who officially hit the waiver wire. Will the Seahawks have interest in claiming him or signing him if he clears waivers? I'm going to share my latest insight on a potential Russell Wilson and Odell Beckham Jr. union in Seattle. As always, thanks for listening in. Glad to have you on board. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. We want to make sure you are the smartest Seahawk fans in the room. So as always, thanks for listening. Now for your lead story here on Locked On Seahawks. It's time. That's what Russell Wilson tweeted with a video this morning on social media showcasing his journey recovering from surgery on his right middle finger. There were clips of him doing some exercises post-operation, throwing the football, and of course, a short little clip of Lambeau Field. And that's because Russell Wilson is expected to return to the field after missing 3 games against the Packers. He's been cleared by Dr. Steve Shin, who performed his operation on his finger last month. So he was designated to return from injured reserve today. Some interesting comments from Steve Shin that were posted on the Seahawks social media. On October 7, 2021, Russell Wilson sustained severe injuries to the middle finger on his right throwing hand during a game. He had immediate surgery the following day in the form of a repair of a fracture dislocation of his proximal interphalangeal joint and an extensor tendon rupture, also known as mallet finger. Although this was uncharted territory, I have never in my career seen such severe injury to the throwing hand of an NFL quarterback. I have also never encountered a player so committed to his post-operative therapy and with so much conviction to return to the same, if not better level of performance as he had pre-injury. I am absolutely amazed at his progress, so much so that I can now confidently clear him for return to play without reservation. This shouldn't come as a surprise when we're talking about Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson throughout his career has truly been Iron Man for the Seahawks. Before this injury, he had never missed a game in his NFL career, but we had never really seen how he would handle being injured. He did have a knee issue that he dealt with during the 2015 season, but he played every game through it. A lot of people thought he was going to miss at least 2 or 3 games. He played through it. He's always been so tough and so durable, and Pete Carroll's called him an incredible healer. He once again showed that to be the case here. He did everything that he could do throughout this process, including last week. I mean, Pete Carroll himself said it's going to take Wilson a few days after he has the pin removed from his finger before he'll be able to start throwing the football. Well, what did Russell Wilson do literally 24 hours after the pin was removed? He posted video of him already throwing the football. That's just the way that he's programmed, an incredible healer. And now he is well positioned to be able to face off against Aaron Rodgers. And obviously, this is a big deal for the Seahawks at 3-5. They're 2 games under 500. They're 3rd place in the NFC West, but they are only half a game out of the final wild card spot in the NFC. They can thank a soft bottom of the NFC for that. It's a very top-heavy conference because you've got teams like the Cardinals, the Rams, Buccaneers that are near the top that have 7-6 wins apiece. And then from there, there's a big drop-off. Carolina was 4-4 going into Week 9, and they had control of the number 7 spot. They lost to the Patriots yesterday. So now the Atlanta Falcons at 4-4 have that final wild card spot. Is a very soft bottom half of the NFC right now. So the Seahawks can take advantage of that if they get hot in the second half. And a key component of that is having Russell Wilson back in action. Remains to be seen whether the Packers are going to have Aaron Rodgers back. He missed Sunday's game against the Chiefs on the COVID-19 list. He's not eligible to be activated because he's unvaccinated until Saturday. So the Packers will be activating him at the earliest 1 day before they play the Seahawks. So remains to be seen whether Rodgers is going to be out there. The expectation is he's going to be starting this game. So Rodgers versus Wilson, part 9. They've split the series up to this point, 4 games apiece that they've won. And interestingly, neither quarterback has won a game at the other quarterback's home venue. The Seahawks are 4-0 with Wilson as quarterback at Lumen Field. Against the Packers, they're 0-4 at Lambeau Field. They haven't won at Lambeau Field actually since 1999, which was Mike Holmgren's first season as Seahawks head coach. So when you consider it's been a long time, more than 2 decades since the Seahawks won at Lambeau, they're hoping they can break that streak with Russell Wilson coming back from his injury. And he's not the only player that has a chance to be back from injured reserve. Rookie D. Eskridge, who's been sidelined since week 1 with a severe concussion, was also designated to return to practice on Monday. This was expected a few weeks ago. Pete Carroll said out of the bye that he was going to be ready to return after he visited with a vision specialist in Florida. They feel like he made the progress he needed to, and clearly that's the case with him getting to return to practice. So they could have their explosive rookie receiver back to team up with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett for this game in Green Bay. And they also designated cornerback Nigel Warrior from injured reserve. He's been sidelined since week 1. They claimed him off waivers from the Ravens, a bigger bodied corner with some special teams ability, has played some safety as well. He's been dealing with a knee injury for the first half of the season, but Pete Carroll said a few weeks ago he was getting close. Now they've designated him to return to practice. Remains to be seen whether they're going to activate him to the 53-man roster this week, given their cornerback situation. But certainly he will have a chance to compete against the likes of Bless Austin and Trey Brown, as everybody's vying for snaps in that secondary, and he could make his mark on special teams. So both those players have a chance to be activated this week as well. Chris Carson was not designated to return to practice from injured reserve yet, but he was expected to meet with doctors and trainers today to try to get clearance. He's missed the last 4 games with a neck injury, been on IR since Russell Wilson was placed, both of them placed on injured reserve at the same time. His status remains uncertain. May have a little better idea where he stands tomorrow. The Seahawks may be able to designate him to return tomorrow, depending on how things work out today. But he was not on that list of players designated to return on Monday. When I come back in the second quarter, I'm going to answer your questions in our weekly mailbag segment. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle, and it's a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirectTV Stream. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. You can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. The nice part, I don't have to worry about juggling remotes anymore. Don't need to buy another device. And there's no annual contract. That's the real winner for me here. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion. Get your TV together with DirectTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Monday edition. The Seahawks fresh off of a bye week, getting ready to face the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Really has been one of their houses of horrors over the years. As I mentioned earlier in the show, they have not won there since 1999. They're hoping to snap that streak and get closer to 500 in a top-heavy NFC. 4-5 might be good enough to get them into that number 7 spot as the final wild card after Week 10, depending how other games play out. Just doesn't seem like anybody else really wants to grab those last couple wild card spots right now in the NFC. That's kept the door open for the Seahawks despite losing 5 of the first 8 games to still get back to the playoffs. It's time for our weekly mailbag segment. Tons of questions from you, the 12s. A lot of them were about a certain big name receiver. I included a few of those in this Q&A, but I decided to dedicate an entire segment to that. So we'll get to Odell Beckham Jr. for the most part later in the show, but I will tackle a few of your questions here. A lot of other Seahawks-related topics as well. Let's get rolling. First one coming from Bryce Coots. Corbin, do you believe that Chris Carson will return this season, and do you think Seattle will have him or Rashad Penny on the roster next year? So answering the first part of that question, I think it's truly 50-50 when we're talking about a neck issue. Carroll sounded a lot more optimistic a few weeks ago about Carson's chances of being able to play, but he did mention it that, he's still got to get clearance from the doctors. He's got to be comfortable enough to be out there on the field. They don't want to force the issue. I don't know that he gets back this week, but at least with that latest update from Carroll, it makes me a little more optimistic about him being able to play at some point this year. This week, I'm just not so sure I'm sold on that. As far as what that could mean for his future, if he's somehow missed the rest of the season, I don't see how the Seahawks can go into 2022 with him as their starting running back, at least on his current contract. So I'd be surprised if they bring him back under those circumstances. If he comes back here in the next few weeks and he has a really big second half, then yeah, the Seahawks could entertain bringing him back for 2022. Rashad Penny, it's going to take a very shocking second half for him to even play his way back into contention. I mean, he's got 16 carries for 24 yards. To play his way into their future plans, he's going to have to, for one, stay healthy, and two, he's going to have to find a way to contribute in some capacity, because to this point, the 3 games he's played, it feels like he's just been wasting snaps. That's the honest truth. Some of it has been bad blocking in front of him, but he's had plays, he's had cutback lanes, there's been creases in front of him, and he hasn't taken advantage of them. He hasn't shown the burst that he did before his ACL injury a few years ago. So right now, I think that it's pretty set in stone that he's not going to be back with the Seahawks in 2022, barring an unexpected second half where he really contributes and finds a groove. If that happens, then maybe the Seahawks might consider it, especially if Carson doesn't play at all in the second half. Maybe they will turn back to Rashad Penny, but I'm just not seeing it happen right now. Long ball Larry, if Chris Carson gets shut down for the season, do you see DJ Dallas getting more touches? I feel like he has earned more playing time. But you can make an argument for DJ Dallas, but I'm actually going to argue for his former Miami teammate, Travis Homer, a player that end of August I thought was on the hot seat to get cut because he wasn't healthy in training camp. He struggled last year. He battled some injuries in his second season. And I really never saw that between the tackles running style that the Seahawks like, the physicality. Well, he showed up with extra muscle added to his frame. That doesn't always work out for running backs in the NFL, but it's really benefited Travis Homer. He has 60 yards on 9 carries this year, over 100 receiving yards in limited action, and he's been so dynamic on special teams, and he is still the best pass protector in the backfield for the Seahawks. It's not even close. He was fantastic against the Jaguars their last game in week 8. I think I had him down for 6 pass protecting reps, and he dominated on all of those reps, picked up a couple blitzes, really helped Geno Smith have time to be able to scan the field, look through his progressions, and hit his open receiver. So Homer's the one I think has earned the playing time. And DJ Dallas, you can make an argument too. Both those players deserve to be playing right now over Rashad Penny. There's no question in my mind, but it feels like Homer is the one that's really stood out the last few games and looks like he deserves more opportunities moving forward if Chris Carson's not there and Alex Collins is your starter. I think Homer should be your secondary back right now. That's the way I'd lean. DJ Dallas still gets some reps as well, but Homer's been impressive lately. Jeremy, most beneficial loss the Seahawks were helped by yesterday. This is a tough one because there were several that were helpful. I wasn't surprised the Panthers lost to the Patriots because Sam Darnold has been a train wreck for the last 4 or 5 games. His first 2 or 3 games looked like, wow, it was the Adam Gase effect. He's been so much better in Carolina, and he's regressed back to his New York Jets form, and they've lost 5 of their last 6 games. So I don't really consider them a team to be fearful of or scared of getting to the playoffs with the quarterback situation, the offense they have. So that one wasn't too big of a deal to me, even though they were the 7th seed going into week 9. They're a team that's unraveling right now, and they've got a real issue on their hands at quarterback. I think the Vikings lost to the Ravens in overtime because it looked like Minnesota was going to pull that game out, and that didn't happen. The Ravens ended up overcoming a Lamar Jackson interception overtime, got a second possession, went down, got the game-winning field goal. The Vikings at 3-5 hold the tiebreaker on the Seahawks because they beat the Seahawks head-to-head in week 3. But you want the Vikings, because they have that tiebreaker, to get as many losses as possible. So them losing a game like that they probably should have won, that's a big deal in my opinion. And I also think the Rams losing to the Titans, them falling to 7-2, they looked vulnerable in that game. And I mentioned it last week. I thought the Rams, after making that Von Miller trade with the talent they have, I thought for sure they were going to be the team to look out for in the NFC West in the second half, not the Cardinals. Well, the Cardinals sent a message to the 49ers the other day. And what the Rams did against the Titans, I think that holds notice. The Seahawks could have beaten the Rams. Geno Smith almost managed to pull it out in the fourth quarter after Russell Wilson was hurt. So they have shown some vulnerabilities, and watching the way the Titans were able to physically manhandle them, didn't have great success on offense, but they made plays when they needed to, and such a commanding defensive effort. that's got to be assuring to the Seahawks. If we can get on a run, maybe they can still catch the Rams in the NFC West. I don't see them catching the Rams and the Cardinals, especially if the Cardinals are going to win games with their backups the way that they did yesterday. They just look really good right now. So that to me, those are the two games, the Vikings and Rams losses, that are going to benefit the Seahawks the most moving forward. And they were able to shoot up to 10th in the NFC standings. They were 13th going into week 9 on their bye. So able to move up 3 spots without playing in any games certainly helped that the Vikings lost. The Saints losing because they have a tiebreaker, that could end up looming large with their quarterback situation as well. Edward writes, what must the Seahawks do to ensure a playoff spot? What adjustments are you making to the offense and defense to make sure that it happens? I don't think any adjustments really need to be made schematically from a defensive standpoint. The pass rush has to be more consistent. It feels like the secondary is coming together. Getting DJ Reed back at right corner has really helped. Trey Brown and Sidney Jones have played well the last couple of games at left corner. The safeties, Quandre Diggs playing an all-pro. Jamal Adams has been better the last couple games. Ryan Neal's given them some very valuable snaps. They just need more consistency from the pass rush. I think Carlos Dunlap turning things around the past few games. There's going to be a ripple effect with the rest of that defensive line being able to get after quarterbacks. On offense, I want to see that offense that we saw in week 1 in Indianapolis, where there's more pre-snap motion, and not just motion just for the sake of it, but there's got to be a purpose to it. I want to see that pre-snap motion. I want to see the tight ends get a little bit more involved in this offense. In the run game, I think Seattle needs to lean a bit more on gap concepts because of their personnel. Let Gabe Jackson and Damian Lewis bully people. That's where they're at their best as run blockers. Asking them to do a lot of zone blocking, I don't think necessarily fits their strength. So those would be some of the things that I would check off there on offense moving forward to adjust. And that's only going to help Russell Wilson with getting some of those plays downfield to his star receivers. After school quesadilla, with Russell Wilson and Eskridge being activated off IR, who do you think are the corresponding moves to the practice squad? Well, I think Jacob Eason's going to be one of them that gets cut. They were able to bring him in. Maybe they believe this time, well, the Colts didn't want him. We can slip him through waivers and we can put him on the practice squad. That's what the Seahawks ultimately would like to do there. I don't expect them to carry 3 quarterbacks going into this game against Green Bay. And I think maybe a player like Penny Hart, as valuable as he is on special teams, especially if OBJ ends up coming to the Seahawks. And again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves there, but I could see Penny Hart being the one that ends up getting cut. They already cut him at the end of training camp and he started on practice squad. So he's a player that they have shown they're willing to do that with. But I would think those are the 2 moves. As far as Nigel Warrior at corner, I don't know how they're going to be moving with that one because they've been impressed with Trey Brown. They like Bless Austin. I just don't know if there's a spot for him right now. They have 3 weeks to make a decision. They don't have to activate him or Eskridge to the roster this week if they're not ready or they don't have a spot ready for that player. So that's one thing to keep in mind here. DK Marabo, with Warrior coming off IR, do we have any expectation of him competing with Brown for that second corner spot, as he is in that more classic Carroll mold for the position? He's a bigger corner, longer arms, physical player, has played some safety, but I don't expect right now. I mean, they're going to be having him compete on the field, but he's not going to be vying for playing time right now. Trey Brown's been impressive. I think he's going to be their starter ultimately moving forward at left corner. DJ Reed's done a nice job on the right side. Sidney Jones has improved as he's got more experience. So there's really not a spot for him right now in the lineup, but if he can contribute on special teams and he does have the ability to play some safety as well, it gives them another versatile player that they may be able to put on their 53-man roster. I just don't see a fit right now for him getting out there on the field, but they have time. Again, they have that 3-week window to activate him to the roster or put him back on IR. So they'll have some time to evaluate him and see where he fits moving forward. Chris Rue, do you think that the reports of Russell Wilson wishing this Odell Beckham deal would happen bother the other receiver skill guys already here in Seattle? No, Chris, I don't. I don't think DK Metcalf's going to be sitting there slamming on the table like, why are we adding another talented receiver to this mix? No, I think that Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are going to be very accepting of Beckham if he ends up coming to town, because ultimately you want to win football games. And that's going to take pressure off the other 2 receivers too. If opponents are like, well, I can't bracket cover because now I've got Odell Beckham Jr. that I got to worry about in the slot or on the outside, having that third receiver that's a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber player is going to take pressure off the other 2. It just makes life tougher for defenses. So Lockett and Metcalf, they're not selfish players. They are team players. they would be more than happy to share some of their targets with Odell Beckham Jr. if he ends up in Seattle. So I don't see that being an issue they have to worry about. Last question here from Sam Brunson. If not on a waiver wire claim for OBJ, where should the Seahawks look to use the remainder of their cap space? You want an honest answer? I don't know what else they can use it on. I mean, unless you're going to do a midseason extension for a player like Quandre Diggs, and I'm supposing that's possible. That's not usually been John Schneider's MO, but it's possible. But there's really nothing else on the free agent market. I mean, Deshaun Jackson just got plucked up by the Raiders, so he's not going to be signing with Seattle. If Beckham doesn't go to the Seahawks, unless you're going to bring in somebody like Geno Atkins, at this point, I don't know that they need him on the defensive line. The interior defensive lines played pretty well in recent weeks with Monet, Woods, and Poona Ford. I just don't see anybody else out there. There's not a corner that's going to instantly come in and compete. The center position, as much as it'd be nice to have more competition for Ethan Posick and Kyle Fuller, it's a bit late to do that. Since the trade deadline's passed. So this really is the one chance to use a big chunk of that money that you have. Otherwise, it's going to roll over to the next year. And maybe that's what the Seahawks want to do moving into 2022. But if you're serious about winning, then you certainly got to entertain the Beckham signing. I just don't see any other players out there that are going to be worth the cap space they have to bring him in right now. There's just not any big names they could sign and add to their roster. When I return in the third quarter, speaking of Odell Beckham Jr., there's a lot of rumors out there, a lot of speculation. I'm going to share the latest that I've heard on the Beckham front in regard to Seattle's interest, whether or not they're going to bring him in as a waiver claim or a free agent signing. Going to break down all the details and share my thoughts on what the Seahawks should do with that situation. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you haven't tried a Built Bar by now, you are missing out. I promise you. They say it's a protein bar, but it tastes like a candy bar. You have to try one of these amazing bars yourself to believe it. Most protein bars are chalky or waxy. They're difficult to chew up. A Built Bar is soft, covered in 100% real chocolate. And when you bite into it, you know you're eating something different. It's really an experience that you're going to enjoy. They're low carb, low calorie, low fat, low sugar, high in protein. I always eat Built Bars before I lift weights or go for a long run. All the healthy benefits on top of just being purely delicious. And there's so many good flavors. Salted caramel, mint brownie, my personal favorite, peanut butter brownie, double chocolate. This month, Built is coming out with new limited time flavors every 3 to 4 days. So make sure to check out their website often because you won't want to miss out. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. BetOnline is back and better than ever. They've got a new web interface for the start of the basketball season, more props, odds, and lines than ever before. They're your number one spot for all the football and basketball action this season. So make sure to head to their new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of the amazing offers available for the upcoming season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Monday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. In case you've been hiding under a rock, the Browns and star receiver Odell Beckham Jr. agreed late last week to a split. They negotiated a revised contract, eliminating the last 2 years on Beckham's contract and releasing him. He officially hit waivers today at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There's been a lot of speculation about which teams may have interest in claiming Beckham off waivers. Most of the reports that I've seen have suggested that he is going to slip through waivers because under the terms of his restructured contract, the Browns and Beckham did not change anything about the rest of this season. He is due $7.25 million by whichever team claims him for the rest of this year. So you're looking at 8-9 games and you're paying him $7.25 million. So there are a lot of teams out there that's too pricey for, but the Seahawks are one of 9 teams in the league right now that have enough cap space to be able to absorb that contract. According to overthecap.com, they've got more than $13 million in cap room right now. So they could fit Beckham in if they wanted to. And based on the discussions that I've had, the Seahawks have had internal discussions and they've explored the possibility of signing Beckham. Russell Wilson has pled with the organization to go out and get him. That should not be surprising given his interest in getting Antonio Brown the last couple of years. Russell Wilson's always looking for as many weapons to throw to as possible. He and Beckham have a past relationship, and this interest is mutual. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, originally reported this, but I've been told by a couple other sources that I've talked to that Beckham has Seattle near the top of his wish list. He's looking for a team with a proven veteran quarterback. Wilson certainly checks that off, and he also wants to play for a contender. And as I mentioned, yeah, they're 3-5, but the Seahawks are half a game out of the final wildcard spot. They are still very much alive in the playoff hunt, and they've consistently made the postseason. So it is still a place that players want to go. So Odell Beckham Jr. certainly wants to go to Seattle. The Seahawks have shown some interest. How much interest remains to be seen. Teams have till 4 p.m. tomorrow to put in a claim for his remainder of his contract. Again, that's $7.25 million. And that's really the sticking point here. Will the Seahawks be willing to take on that much money for a player that's going to be wide receiver number 3 behind DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett? My personal opinion, I think this is a no-brainer. If you believe that he can help your team and you're not concerned about the ego and headache issues that he's had that have led to his ouster with 2 other teams, that is that's a valid issue that the Seahawks are going to have to consider here. But they have a culture they believe they can fit different types of personalities in. Most of his teammates with the Giants and the Browns respected his work ethic, didn't have any issues with him. He's left on decent terms with his teammates for the most part. So I don't know that I would consider him to be a diva that you're bringing in necessarily. That could be something to consider. But if it's just boiling down to how much you have to pay him the rest of the season, what else are the Seahawks going to be spending that money for? You could make the argument, well, they should have used this cap space they have. It should have been used back in March to get a better center or upgrade the cornerback position better than they did. Yes, that's a valid argument, but you don't want to compound that mistake now by not taking advantage of the opportunity to sign a player like Beckham, who is a 3-time Pro Bowler, has been a second-team All-Pro, has multiple 1,000-yard seasons in his career, is dynamic after the catch, can win as a deep ball threat. He's still only 29 years old. Yes, $7.25 million is a lot of money for half a season, but they can fit it in. They can fit it in without having to worry about their salary cap going right off to the edge. Again, they have over $13 million in cap space. So $7.25 million is a large chunk, but it's not going to ruin their salary cap for the rest of the season. Don't compound the mistakes you made in free agency by not taking advantage of bringing in a player that can help your football team without having to sacrifice draft picks after the trade deadline. I mean, to me, if it's all about costs, that should not be an issue for the Seahawks here. Obviously, the ego concern, the worries about his injuries. He missed most of last year with a torn ACL. He's had a few other injuries in his career. Those are valid arguments against bringing him in. But you have a quarterback in Russell Wilson who has a prior relationship with Beckham. The 2 of them are close friends. Obviously, Wilson's going to be pushing buttons trying to make this happen. You want to please your quarterback, especially after the way the last offseason unfolded with the trade rumors, things of that nature. Go out and get that player that he is asking for you to sign. You have the money to do it. So if he slips through waivers, I would be surprised if he doesn't sign with the Seahawks, based on what I've been told. The Seahawks near the top of this list. They check off all the boxes. They're still in contention. They've got Russell Wilson coming back from his injury. He's going to be back under center. He's going to have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to take pressure off of him. He's not going to have double teams. He's not going to have to worry about being the top target that opponents are game planning for. He's going to be number 3. All 3 receivers can benefit from that. And his ability to create after the catch on slants and screens, you can use him in the run game. I still believe he can help any team in that regard. It just wasn't working out with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. But I don't think that'll be the case with Russell Wilson, one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, and a quarterback that just really knows how to get the ball to his star receivers. I think that this relationship would work for half a season, and you don't have to worry about giving him another contract after this year. He becomes a free agent. It's a half-a-year rental. Is it an expensive one? Sure, but they have the money to do it. And if you're serious about winning, then I think it's a no-brainer. Again, if you're considering other issues, if you don't think he fits into the locker room picture, you're worried about him potentially being a cancer in that regard, then sure, you stay away. They've done their due diligence. They've looked into it. If they decide this just isn't a good fit, then that's fine. But if it's all revolving around money and they choose not to put in a claim and another team behind him ends up getting him as a result, that's going to be a bad look for the Seahawks. So we'll see what happens. I haven't gotten any indication that they were going to put in a waiver claim. Again, a lot of the other reports out there suggesting that Beckham's going to slip through waivers because of that $7.25 million price tag. But maybe John Schneider will look at it as a situation where, you know what, it is worth that money. That assures that we get this player. We don't think the other 8 teams in front of us in the waiver order are going to put in a claim. Let's go see if we can get him, and let's avoid the risk if he becomes a free agent, could potentially go to the Buccaneers or Rams or somebody else like that. Let's take that out of the picture because we have the money. We can bring him in. Russell Wilson wants him. So the next 15, 16 hours are going to be very interesting leading up to that 4 p.m. deadline on Tuesday to see whether or not he's claimed. And if he isn't, how aggressive the Seahawks are pursuing him, trying to team him up with Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. I'm expecting that they are going to be very aggressive based on what I've been told, but we'll just have to wait and see how this process plays out. This is a unique situation. You don't often see players of Beckham's talent that get released after the trade deadline like this, and it's really been a situation that developed quickly. They were trying to trade him for the deadline based on tweets from his dad and LeBron James saying, free OBJ. So there's been a lot of pressure there that's been applied late in the process. You just don't see this very often. And this is a unique opportunity for the Seahawks to add talent if they're willing to pay the money that they currently have. They have the cap space to be able to make it happen. So we'll see what happens. But if OBJ ends up with the Seahawks, I can assure you on Locked On Seahawks, we will be talking a lot about it this week leading up to the Packers game. And I would assume if he gets signed quickly that he's got a chance to be out there on the field with them right away. This is a player that can pick up the playbook fairly quickly, at least learn some plays to contribute. So we'll see how this all plays out. Certainly other teams will be watching this closely too. If he slips through waivers, that opens the door for a lot of teams that don't have the cap space to pick up his contract to be able to sign him for a much cheaper deal. So this is going to be an evolving storyline. I'm really fascinated to see if any teams, including the Seahawks, decide, you know what, let's bite the bullet. Let's pay the money. Let's claim him off waivers. Remains to be seen. It's uncertain what's going to happen here with OBJ and where his next landing spot will be moving forward for the remainder of the 2021 season. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen every day. Now make sure to make your second listen the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available on all platforms. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. Check out Locked On Seahawks on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the all-new Odyssey app. That's AUDACY. Coming up on our Tuesday episode, I'll be rejoined by my colleague Rob Rang. We'll be revisiting the past couple matchups between the Seahawks and Packers for Throwback Tuesday and taking a look at what's new at Lambeau Field, what's changed for the Packers since the 2020 season. Quite a bit of changes in season for the Packers as well. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.